Hailey was very independent as a child. I never was able to swaddle her and hold her real close or anything because she was always wanted to be facing everybody. She wanted to see what was going on, and she's lively. I could tell you that. She kept me on my toes as a child. I knew pretty early on, though, that she had some mental health issues. There was behavioral things. Around 6 years old, she started having night terrors, and I tried taking her to a therapist, and they told me that she was manipulating me. There was nothing wrong with her. And I went with that. And, they're professional, so I believed them, and I ignored it. She had night terrors, and I would tell her to stop overreacting. And I should have listened to my gut. I knew something was wrong with her. Even at 6 years old, I knew she had issues. But I still live with a lot of regret about that. I should have held her when she cried. As she got older, I noticed that the mental health, what I thought was some issues, it seemed to kind of go away for a while. And at 10 years old, I got a phone call from the school, and they told me she was self-harming. They'd found cuts on her arm. So I went to the school, and sure enough, at 10 years old, she had scars, old scars, and new cuts all up and down her arm at 10 years old. And that's when I knew that I was right. I knew she needed help. We seen therapist after therapist. Hailey was always so uncomfortable with people. So we visited a lot of therapists. She was in and out of some mental health hospitals. We got her on some medicine. We found out that she was had borderline personality disorder. It was pretty severe. She could have outbursts, violent outbursts. But I always had her back. I always made sure, if the therapist set out a plan, we followed it. There's something here in Kentucky called a 504 plan that schools enact for kids with mental health issues. And one of her things was she gets overwhelmed when teachers call on her and stuff like that. So when she would get overwhelmed, she had permission to go to the office and decompress. And it always turned into an issue. School's always calling me, telling me that she's taking advantage of it. And you know what? My daughter was never the child that said, "Oh, don't call my mom." She was always like, "Yeah, call my mom. My mom has my back." And I would go there, and I would let them know that, look, she's got a 504 plan. Let's follow it. We got professionals saying this is what my daughter needs. Let's follow it. School was so hard. When I could get her to go, she usually ended up in trouble or sometimes fighting. She hated school. There was nothing about school she enjoyed except maybe her friends. Friends were very important to Hailey. I think that was in her life, her only constant other than me was her friends. And at 16, they were going to be the ones that saved her life the first time. At 16, she cut her arm. She attempted suicide. She cut her arm from elbow to wrist. And she posted it to Snapchat. And all her friends called the police. When we were woken up by the police knocking on the door, we went outside when they went in to see about Hailey. I had 16 kids, almost 16 kids in my front yard. They all showed up for her. And I think that meant a lot to her at that moment because she really did feel alone. And so social media and her friends saved her life that night. I made a promise to her that night that I would have to break eventually, but I promised her if she died, that wherever she was to stay there, because I would be right behind her. I had to break that promise to her. Because 2 months later, we found out she was pregnant. And I was scared. I was scared I'd almost lost her, and now my 16-year-old's pregnant. I ended up quitting my job for 2 years, staying home, making sure she was okay. So scared to lose her. I fought so hard for her that I wasn't going to lose her. But that turned out to be the best 2 years I ever had with her. Pregnancy was good to her. She found a reason to live. And she was so happy. I think it was the happiest I'd ever seen her since she was a kid. She was a healthy pregnant. She glowed. She was a little tiny thing, too. So when she had Violet, my granddaughter, she was the happiest I've seen her. And for 2 years after that, I had my daughter back. And then everything changed. My granddaughter was 2. Her and the baby, the father, they broke up. He was suffering with alcoholism. And Hailey was, she's over it. And he had gotten in some trouble drinking and driving, and part of his parole was he couldn't be in a house with alcohol and stuff. And so we made it, we told him he couldn't stay at our house because, we had alcohol in our home, and we also were registered gun owners, and he couldn't be around none of that. And Hailey took that opportunity to break up with him. And that night, we were out with my cousin. We were out in the backyard and with my cousins. And Hailey called me from the house because it was down a hill. She called me from the house, and she's screaming, "Mama, help me. Mama, help me. Please get here fast. Mama, help me." So me and my brother ran up the hill. And I found my daughter just beat. He beat her so bad. He strangled her. He almost killed her. We did all the right stuff. We called the police and filed a report, put EPO out on her or out on him, and we did it right. I'd dealt with some domestic violence in my past, and with her father, actually, and I didn't do it right. So when I did need help, I didn't have a paper trail to get the help. So we done it right, and we got the help, and that was the turning point for Hailey. I think that's when she started dabbling in drugs. And then we had a close relationship, so she was able to tell me about a lot of it. I know she dabbled with marijuana, and I know she dabbled with Molly. But like she said, she would tell Mom, I would never do nothing serious. I've seen my dad fight addiction, and I don't want to end up like my dad. And I'd beg her to be careful, and I knew nothing about fentanyl. Like, I heard about, people who had fentanyl patches because of pain and stuff like that, but I didn't know that kids were using that stuff. And that's when she met a boy. And this boy was going to introduce her to fentanyl. And my whole world, he ruined my whole world. She called me. I was at work one day. And she says her and the boy were fighting. She wanted to break up with him. And I was like, okay, then I'll make sure he leaves, because he was staying with us. And she's like, Mom, you don't understand. He's threatening to call CPS on us. I was like, well, let him call. We ain't doing nothing wrong. Let him call. Don't be scared of that. Let him call. And she's like, no, Mama, you don't understand. We've been doing drugs. And I was like, okay, well, me and my wife were sober. You know, that helps if CPS gets involved, that she lives in a home and we're sober, and we'll get you to a rehab and we'll get it all worked out. And she's like, I was like, what are you doing? And she kept saying heroin. And I could hear him in the back, and he'd tell her, no, it's not heroin. And called her some names. He was like, it's fentanyl. And I was like, oh my God. Why would you do that, Hailey? I don't know, Mama. I just like sleeping. I like how I can sleep with it. Okay, I got home and we removed the boy. We kicked him out of the house, and we looked into some rehabs. My daughter wasn't religious, and she wasn't spiritual at all. And she hated the idea of rehabs because of that. And but she found one, and that same night, we took her to rehab, and I hugged my daughter goodbye. And then I told her, you can't come home till you finish this rehab. She called me the next day. Mama, all they talk about is religion. I can't do this. I told her, I was like, Hailey, you have to finish this, and then you can come home. Well, I'm going to call my friend. She called a friend, and that friend picked her up, and she stayed with that friend. That was September of 2022. And she stayed with that friend, and she admitted that she was doing lines of fentanyl and Percocet mixed together. So she called me a few times telling me about new rehabs she had tried. And then another one where she had found a Suboxone clinic. And she stayed there a week. And she medically detoxed. And she thought she was doing really good, so she went into sober living, and we were super proud. A week later, I got a call from the Louisville coroner's office telling me that Hailey had passed away. They believed it was a drug overdose. They found her in her room. I'm guessing she had just came from the bathroom. And she had just fallen asleep as she was bent down trying to unlock the lockbox. I guess to put her drugs back in. And she just fell asleep. She was on her knees, rolled up, like in an infant position, but on her knees. She was still holding on to her mascara. And she was still holding on to her bag that had her drugs in it. She had them clutched in her hands. I didn't know. Because that day, I dropped her off at her first rehab, that would be the last time I'd hug her. You just don't know. We had to go to sober living to pick up her stuff. And I needed to know, so I started talking to the girls that live there. And they told me that they Narcaned her. They tried to save her. I needed to know where she was laying. I needed to know. I needed to know. So I asked the ladies, and they told me. And they told me that she'd had a new boyfriend. And that's because the last few months of her life, I didn't even, I knew nothing about what was going on. But she admitted in September that she was using. I don't know how long she was using before that, but she admitted in September of 2022, and I lost her in February of 2023. I didn't get years to fight for my daughter. I didn't get time to fight for her at all. It took her so quick. And then you have to deal with, I was angry at the friend. Because how could he miss? And then my daughter was shooting up. He was telling me she was sober. And then I asked him to send some pictures for her celebration of life. And the pictures he sent, you could see it. You could see the marks. You could see the tourniquet bruises. You could see it. And he didn't. He didn't see it. He seen how beautiful she was, but he didn't see that she was in pain still. And I was kind of mad at him for that for a while. But when you love someone, I guess you don't want to see the negative. I still talk to him. He was one of her best friends, and I just hate that nobody's seen it. I seen it. I seen she was suffering. But she made sure she surrounded herself with people who wouldn't see it. Addiction was really bad for her. And I didn't get a chance to fight for her. And I live with that because I've always fought for her. I always fought for her. And even when nobody believed there was something wrong, I fought for her. I have really been pressing to parents that pay attention. And when you have something and you feel something and you feel that there's something wrong, don't let nobody tell you different. You need to stomp your feet. You need to cross your arms, and you need to tell them something's wrong with my child. And as friends, no matter how much you love them, you pay attention to them. And I also really would like somehow to start somewhere here in Kentucky. Maybe a rehabilitation for people who don't have a spirituality or a religion. I think Hailey would have had a better chance if she had that option. She needed mental health help. And a lot of places here in Kentucky want to Band-Aid that. She was never going to get better until she got all the help she needed, and that included mental health help. And I'd just like to see some change here in Kentucky with that. I would like to see these people who are getting these drugs for our kids, I'd like to see them charged. I'd like to see them to go to jail. There was no investigation. My daughter had her phone right beside her. They didn't look at her phone. They didn't try to find out who got her those drugs. And they probably wouldn't have even Narcaned her, but the sober living place Narcaned her instead. Because they look at our children and they think that they're less than because they were addicts or because they fell victim to this disease. And I think that's why a lot of us go without any justice. Because, I've heard it before and I still hear it. How many people that say they're addicts, they know what they're doing, and they deserve what they get. Hailey wasn't an addict. She was a mother. She was a daughter. She was a best friend. She wasn't an addict. That was one speck of who Hailey was. And I hope her story helps somebody. Because my baby didn't have this bright, shining star above her head. She suffered so much. And in the end, I only got 22 years.